So today we are still working on brushing up on skill sets that we should have acquired in the pre-algebra course, which is the prerequisite to this. So I just like to think of this as just sort of checking, make sure we have all our skills. Okay, so we're going to look at add and subtract real numbers, keywords for addition and subtraction, say in a word problem, and what rules do you use when you add and subtract real numbers. We'll look at multiply and divide real numbers. Are there any keywords for it? I like to think of it as trigger words when you're reading a word problem. Rules for multiplying and dividing real numbers. And then, of course, order of operations. Some people think of that as PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. If you've never seen that acronym before, the P is for parentheses. The E is for the exponents. The M is for your multiplication. D is for divide. And then, of course, add and subtract at the end. And we'll go more deeply into what that acronym really means in a moment. Okay, let's start off with addition and subtraction of real numbers. Are there any keywords? Meaning, when you're reading a paragraph, what are your trigger words that you know you're going to be adding or subtracting? So, let's take a look. For addition, you might be thinking sum, maybe increased by, maybe more than. Think out of the box here. Perimeter. All these things are sort of trigger words in a paragraph that indicate to the reader that you might have to add. For subtraction, minus, fewer than. Fewer than, maybe decreased by. Just an old-fashioned verb, less, like 20 less 6. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at rules. Are there any rules that you use when you're actually adding or subtracting? So, example, if you have negative 20 plus 6, how do you figure that out? What rule do you use? So, you might be thinking, okay, that's negative 14. But how do you arrive there? So some people say, well, when you have unlike signs, you just subtract the two numbers, 20 minus 6, and answer takes the sign of the larger number. So subtract, and then answer is going to be negative here, because the larger number is negative, right? So answer will be negative in this case. Okay, now let's try another one. What if you had negative 30 minus 12? Now some of you just look at that and know that's negative 42 because you're comfortable. But if you're looking for a rule, some people say, okay, that's like signs. They're both negative. So like signs, you just add 30 plus 12, which is 42, but then answer takes the sign of the problem. So just kind of thinking that through with you. All right, now let's take a look at multiplication and division, and if there's any keywords. So when we multiply or divide real numbers, keywords. Okay, multiplication versus division. We'll just separate it like that. So you might be thinking product for multiplication. Sometimes the word per, $20 per student, and I have 10 students. So if I'm going to give them each $20, 20 times 10 is 100, right? So be on the lookout for per. Sometimes words like twice, thrice, area, those are all keywords for multiplication. For division, you're looking at words like quotient. There aren't a lot of keywords for division. Sometimes words like distributed evenly. So if I have $1,000 and I'm going to distribute it evenly among 5 people, how much will they each get? So words like that. Okay. Now as for rules, now let's take a look at the rules though. I'm going to zoom in here. Are there any rules for when you're multiplying or dividing sign numbers? So, well, you might be thinking a positive times a positive will yield a positive, but a positive times a negative will yield a negative, and a negative times a positive will yield a negative, but a negative times a negative will yield a positive. So what a lot of people say is, okay, if you have like signs, the answer turns out to be positive. See, here we multiplied like signs, and here we multiplied two negatives, and we got a positive. So notice with like signs, the answer turns out to be positive. When you're multiplying unlike signs, the answer turns out to be negative. So we can kind of see that here. Good news is, that's for when you're multiplying, okay? And division is very similar in nature, right? So if you wanted to map that out, you know, a positive divided by a positive will yield a positive. Positive divided by a negative will yield a negative. And again, it's that business with the unlike signs, you're going to yield a negative, right? Negative divided by a positive, you're going to yield a negative. So this is when we divide, okay? And a negative divided by a negative will yield a positive. Oops, this pen is very fussy today. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we have our keywords and our rules kind of in place. So just to think about that, a little light example here. So if you had -3 times -2 times 4, well here, and you're going to move left to right, so a negative times a negative, that's going to yield a positive, so positive 6. And then times 4, that's going to be 24. Okay? Now if you have a whole expansion of sign numbers, so for example, if you had -1 times -3 times -2 times 1 times -4 times -8, what I always tell people to do is just kind of count out how many of these are, how many negative signs there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here you have an odd number of negative signs in this expansion of multiplication here. So odd number of negative signs, that means you know the result's going to be negative. So the end result's going to be negative. Then you can just go ahead and if it was an even, so result is negative. If there were an even number of negative signs in this problem, the result would have been positive. So in other words, you don't have to think through it left to right. You know the result is negative. So you can just multiply the numbers themselves. 1 times 3 is 3, times 2 is 6, times 1 is still 6, times 4 is 24, and 24 times 8 is whatever that may be. Right, 192. So we know we're going to arrive at a negative 192 then. Some people I've seen, they still move left to right and they go one by one. You can do that, it's just a little more time consuming. And now, to get to my favorite thing, under here I'll just abbreviate order of ops, okay? Little reminders before we tackle, what we're going to do is tackle a sort of a gigantic, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally problem together. Little reminders, remember that absolute value of a number is the positive distance from 0. So therefore the absolute value of -8 is 8, right? The absolute value of positive 8 is still 8, so it doesn't turn things opposite, it turns things positive, right? Positive, I'm going to write that word out a little better there. Positive distance from 0. Okay, so that's a little reminder. Another reminder, these are just things that people have a tough time with sometimes, is on exponents. You know, 2 cubed. It's an exponential expression, right? Just a reminder that that means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So the exponent tells you how many times to carry out that expansion there of multiplication. Other reminder, these are like tricks of the trade here. Other reminder is that -2 squared, with parentheses like that, does not equal -2 squared. This one will come to be 4. This one will come to be -4. And 4 does not equal -4. So those are areas where people sometimes get tripped up. Now let's go ahead and tackle PEMDAS. Okay, so here we have a lovely example. What I always do when I'm dealing with order of operations is I go off on the side and write the acronym, which tells me I have to do my parentheses first, then my exponents, then my multiplication and division. Remember that it gets a little tricky here. You have to move left to right over multiplication and division, whichever comes first, and left to right over addition and subtraction, whichever comes first. Okay? So let's go ahead and zoom in here. The parentheses, you want to take care of your parentheses or bars, any kind of grouping symbol. Get those out of the way first and record your thoughts. So 2 minus 8 is negative 6. Notice I'm going to record that, and I'm going to record every little thing that is still on the page. You want to become robotic in that. Here I'm going to take care of the absolute value of negative 4, though, which is 4. Okay. Now we're moving to exponents. Then PEMDAS says take care of your exponents. Now be careful here. 3 squared without parentheses, you're going to do that first. 3 squared, which is 9, and the negative floats along. So you're going to arrive at negative 9. So negative 9 divided by 3 plus 4. Take care of this exponent before you take care of any kind of multiplication. So negative 6 squared is 36. Note to self, when you have negative 6 with parentheses squared like that, it means negative 6 times negative 6, which is 36. So I'm just going to put that little sidebar there. Okay, here 1 cubed just means 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1, plus 4. All right, now PEMDAS says that you have to take care of multiplication and division before addition and subtraction. So this is going to dominate, and this is going to dominate. And we'll just save these additions and subtractions until the end. So, okay, so negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3 plus, and we want to take care of this, 4 times 36. So whatever 36 times 4 is, which is 144, and then minus 1 plus 4. So right there, when we boil it down to addition and subtraction, we can just move left to right. So negative 3 plus 144 is 141. Minus 1 plus 4, we can keep going left to right. So 141 minus 1 is 140. And then obviously 140 plus 4, we're going to arrive at 144. So you can become very methodical about how you write out your steps. People that skip a whole bunch of steps in PEMDAS often make little errors. So hope that helps. Just for grins and giggles, I figure before I turn off this podcast, let's try one last one together. So negative 2 plus 3 bracket 4 minus 2 paren 3 minus 8 paren end bracket minus 6. Okay, so sometimes you have, many brackets or parentheses. The trick is you're going to want to go inside and work out. Okay? So let's go to these innermost parentheses, 3 minus 8. You can never have enough practice with PEMDAS. 3 minus 8 is negative 5. I always tell my students, just do as many odd number problems in the back of the book and check your answer in the back of the book. Make sure you're getting them one after another. Okay? So notice I've recorded everything. Now here, don't get tricked. Note to self, it gets tricky in here. How's the 2 connected with the negative 5? By multiplication. So multiplication, you do not want to do 4 minus 2. You don't want to do that. So let's take care of the 2 times negative 5, which is negative 10. This subtraction sign here is just going to follow along. So now I've got 4 minus minus 10, which is basically 4 plus 10, which is 14. So you see we can kind of write all that out. So then we arrive at negative 2 plus 3, eventually bracket 14, and then minus 6. Okay? Then we remember that multiplication dominates addition and subtraction, so you have to take care of this. So 3 times 14 is 42. Then you have negative 2 plus 42 minus 6. When you get it down to just addition and subtraction, you can move left to right. So negative 2 plus 42 is 40, and 40 minus 6 is 34. Very good. All right, hope that helps.